My name is Matthias Harder. I'm the director of the Helmut Newton Foundation. We are entering here the project room of the foundation in the ground floor of the Museum of Photography, and we look into the new exhibition Stephan Erfurt on the road. Here the first pictures see in the former shop, the Helmut Newton shop, but now we go into the exhibition room. Everything links to the exhibition in the upper first floor. This is called America 1970s 80s with Helmut Newton, Joe Meyerowitz, Evelyn Hofer and Sheila Metzner, and two of these photographers were very close to Stephan in the 1980s. What we see here on the right side are the color photographs Stephan took from the commission of the magazine, but we are here with Stephan and he can tell even better about this time in the US.
Thank you, Matthias. I'm very happy to have this show here. We start with my color photographs. Big master for me was Joel Meyerowitz. I was in the States to photograph for Frankfurter Allgemeine magazine, which is a weekend supplement. And I had to work on color stories on the US. This was my home base from 84 to 89. Right now you see a photograph from a little bus standing under yellow light near the Golden Gate Bridge, and this was a very important story for me because I was covering the highway number 1 between San Francisco and Los Angeles for my exams at university in Germany at the Folkwang School. You see a couple of more photographs with the bus. The bus is in every image to hold the different landscapes together, and it's a nice story because I wanted to prove that you always can do your own thing with your own personality, even it was already photographed 1,000 times, like the highway number 1. You see more color photographs I took in New York, I took in Miami, I took in Las Vegas. And it was this time where I was very much influenced by Joel Meyerowitz, who also photographed for the Frankfurter Allgemeine magazine. And I'm very thankful that he gave me a lot of advice and that he's showing at the Helmut Newton Foundation at the same time. Right now, there are some photographs from New York. You see this photograph with wooden pile and the grass, and it's about the jungle New York, like when man is not taking care, nature is winning again and taking over everything. And it was a nice story. Unfortunately, it was never published by Frankfurter Allgemeine magazine. Very important photographs from me from Las Vegas. I was there for 4 weeks taking photographs in Caesar's Palace, but also on the city. And now at the very end, there is this very important photograph of Desert Isle Motel, which is also our poster. And probably you see the different colors, the neon colors and the clouds, which are like in a nice rosé tone. And this is very important because usually it's never like this. My nickname was Mr. Twilight because I started working before sunrise and after sunset. And during the day, I organized all my shootings. In this case, I went down the strip and asked every motel owner to switch on the lights 1 hour earlier to override the automatic switches. And because of this, I had this kind of interesting light situations where you still have the daylight or the evening light and the neon light mixing into a kind of very special reality. I remember that a big advertising agency in Germany doing advertising for a kind of whiskey, they wanted to reshoot this image, but they failed because they didn't get the balance from daylight to artificial light. At the very end, the advertising agency bought my photograph from my archive.
In this show, we have more or less 4 aspects. So we have the color photographs framed without glass. They are coming actually directly from scans from the original slides. They have never seen the light as an exhibition print, but this is the first time for us. We have this huge picture as a wallpaper at the very end of the room, of the exhibition room. It shows us the Wall Street on the Sunday morning without anybody, but just with these kind of wandering light reflecting from the windows of the skyscrapers and the parked car. We see these parked cars in several other pictures as well, but now here with the black and white. And then the next aspect within the show is the huge vitrine with a lot of personal items and your publications from the very beginning in the Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung magazine. And we see as well some from Joel. And the last picture within this vitrine is shown as well in our exhibitions. Everything links from one exhibition to the other.
The link is very important to me. There are so many different links. First, as you mentioned, Joel is exhibited at the Helmut Newton Foundation right now, but he was also working for the same magazine, the Frankfurter Allgemeine magazine. And we had a show at CO Berlin with the work of Joel Meyerowitz, and you see the photograph of Joel and me at his exhibition. Then you see the black and white photograph of Evelyn Hofer. I was her assistant from 85 to 86, and this was a photograph I took from her in 2005 in her house in Switzerland just before she died. You also see photographs of Las Vegas when I did my story on Caesar's Palace. You see me walking around in New York with my tripod, a summer situation, just a t-shirt and watching the crowd. Again, there's photographs from Miami Beach, which was my second story, Art Deco in Miami. You see the cover of Art Deco in Miami. You see book covers. There was a publishing house in Frankfurt, the Surkamp publishing house, and they used many of my photographs as their book covers. And at the very end or at the very beginning of the vitrine, you see my photographs from Wall Street, New York. And my first published story, Restaurant America in Color. This was an idea of Joel Meyerowitz. I didn't know the restaurant in New York, and he told me, go there and you will do a wonderful color story on New York restaurants. And actually, yes, it was true. It was my first cover I had for Frankfurter Allgemeine. It was my first published story for the Frankfurter Allgemeine.
In the corner, we see two series. We have on the color wall, we have all the different series you did for Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung. We mixed them together. So it's, this is a kind of a huge portrait of the United States in the 80s. This is the black and white restaurant series from 85 and the Wall Street series in 85.
The Wall Street series is very important for me because when I worked for Evelyn Hofer as an assistant, she always told me, Stephan, you have to do your own photography, go out and shoot. I will curate your photographs. So I went out shooting during the weekends, and this is the very best time to photograph the Wall Street. I started to work with Polaroid slide film. This was a little 35 millimeter slide film. You could develop the film in the street in a little box, and you had the results right away. After 6 months, I had to go home for my visa. And with this photographs in my luggage, I went to the Frankfurter Allgemeine magazine to show them to this magazine. And the picture editor told me, nice photos, but we don't need anything. A famous photographer just has been in New York. So I left, but down the steps, I met the art director by chance. And I just said, now I have to take my chance. I have to ask him if I could show him my work directly, and I went with him to his office, and he said, yes, okay, I will have a look at it. And I showed him 80 slides in a carousel dia projector, and he kept the button pressed and looked at them for like 1 minute, and he said, okay, I would buy it. He said, I like your way you photograph. Please do another story for us in black and white, same style, and photograph New York restaurant. And I went back to New York, was very happy, and I selected 5 restaurants. And coming back to the magazine a couple of weeks later, I was very proud and said, now I have a really nice series. And I showed him the slides, and he was looking at them and said, no, we can't use them. It's nothing for the reader, it's art, and we won't print it. And of course, this was a shock for me. He told me, you have to go back and do it again. And this was the moment I looked at the telephone diary and looked for the name of Joel Meyerowitz, and I just called him, and he was on the phone, and he was very nice from the very first moment and told me, Stephan, yes, I will give you advice. I have a restaurant you can shoot. And the result was that in November 85, my first color story was the cover of the Frankfurter Allgemeine magazine.
So what we see here on the wall is a black and white photograph of Evelyn Hofer she took of you and of Jean-Michel Basquiat. Maybe tell us something about this.
I was assisting Evelyn when we did this photograph, and we went to Jean-Michel Basquiat's home and we were waiting for him. We waited half an hour, we waited 1 hour. Evelyn finally was very annoyed and she took photographs of me sitting in front of the art of Basquiat, and finally he came down and she took those photographs. It was at the very end of the life of Jean-Michel, so he was not in the best shape. But it shows me as a young man. It was winter, I had my sweater on, and of course it was an unbelievable experience. And Evelyn was very important for me because she was photographing with 4x5-inch camera. The camera was on a tripod, of course. I always had to build up a white curtain, a shower curtain, and the lighting was through this curtain. So it was a very soft lighting. The exhibition length was always like half a second or a quarter second, because she was always telling me, if I use longer shutter times, I will get more of the soul of the people into my photograph. And I learned a lot of her.
So we are very happy to have you here in the Helmut Newton Foundation, Stephan. And we see here the last picture. It's a black and white vintage print. At the corner, we have more vintage prints in black and white. And opposite, these new prints realized as inkjets directly from the slides. And then as the third aspect, the photograph as the wallpaper. So we have the different aspects, we have the different media, we have the different films, film speeds here in the show, and we are very happy that we can connect our houses, because you are not only a photographer, you are as well the boss of CO Berlin. How this came up?
I worked for the magazine from 84 to 89. Here you see a wonderful photograph, by the way, of a couple sitting late at night at Restaurant America talking to each other. It was very noisy. Everything is a little bit blurred, but you get a feeling from the atmosphere from this photo. And of course, I like it very much. But the art director from the Frankfurter Allgemeine said, it's too much art. The reader won't understand it. We are a color magazine. You have to work in color. We want to get color advertising for our magazine. But it's more important to decide if you shoot in black and white or color or Polaroid in relation to what your theme is or what your subject is. And this was a time from 84 to 99. I had assignments for 15 years in a row. I never stopped working. I had no excuse, because for the Frankfurter Allgemeine magazine, which is one of the biggest daily newspapers, you got all the permissions you needed. And even you could use a helicopter or a boat. You had no excuses at all. Only as a freelancer, of course, the photography had to be world class. Otherwise, they would hire another photographer. And in 99, the magazine was closed down, as so many other magazines. These big times of editorial photography were coming to an end. We all had to change our lives. And as I have been living such a privileged time, I wanted to engage myself for young people who never will have the chance to work on a story for 10 days and work worldwide. And so I came up with the idea to create non-commercial exhibition space in the heart of a big city, where young people could show their work to collectors, to publishers, to art directors with no commercial pressure. And this was the very beginning of CO Berlin.